Catherine will speak on my behalf. Mrs. Meghan Markle has repeatedly written to the palace seeking our intervention in the Epstein matter, but, like Andrew, she must face her own consequences."
The pen touched the paper, and in that silent instant, the last visible bond between Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, and the monarchy was severed. King Charles did not hesitate. He did not call another meeting. He did not request another compromise. After reviewing evidence that had remained sealed from the public, the monarch signed an order stripping the couple of every remaining royal title, privilege, and ceremonial distinction, and the palace immediately prepared for the consequences. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles read the final paragraph twice. His hand stayed on the page long after the ink had dried, and Camilla understood why. A royal directive, the formal order through which the sovereign records and enforces a decision, was not merely changing a few words. It was removing Harry's princely style, the Duke of Sussex title, Meghan's Duchess of Sussex title, and every honorary distinction still linking them to official royal life. That mattered because a title carried public standing, ceremonial rank, historic continuity, and recognition from the crown itself. Once those protections vanished, the couple would no longer stand as estranged royals. They would stand as private citizens outside the monarchy's formal structure. Camilla watched the king's face but saw no victory there. She saw exhaustion. He had chosen the institution over his younger son, and the cost of that choice sat heavily in the silence between them. Across the Atlantic, Harry received a secure written notice before the palace statement went public. He read the first page, pushed his chair back, and asked whether his father had personally approved every line. Meghan stood beside him, angry but controlled, realizing that the order reached further than either of them had expected. The evidence had forced that reach. Palace investigators had recovered a confidential digital archive containing recorded conversations, private correspondence, and a prepared commercial strategy built around future use of royal identities. Charles had listened, read, and then refused another informal compromise. The announcement was delayed until legal, constitutional, and ceremonial questions had been examined, because the monarch wanted no half measure that could later be challenged or quietly reversed. A senior courtier then opened a locked ceremonial register, removed 2 embossed name cards, and placed them inside a gray archival envelope. Harry and Meghan had not only lost titles, they had been removed from future state planning. Neither household yet knew which recording had finally made mercy impossible for the king himself. The titles were gone, but the real shock was hidden inside the evidence that had forced a father to close the door on his own son. Behind the royal language and carefully measured announcement were 4 people facing 4 different kinds of loss. Charles had sacrificed the hope of restoring his family. Harry had lost the final public symbols of his birth. Meghan had been stripped of the identity that followed her across the world. And William, watching from inside the palace, understood that the decision would protect the crown, but could permanently destroy what remained between 2 brothers. Charles stood between 2 duties that could no longer be reconciled. As sovereign, he believed royal status could not survive when privilege continued without responsibility. A sovereign is the ruling monarch, the person who carries final constitutional authority for the crown. As a father, however, he knew Harry might not see protection or discipline. He might see rejection, delivered through a signature instead of conversation. William entered the private study and found the directive beneath a closed folder. A directive is a formal written order that gives an official decision force. He did not praise the king. He asked whether his brother had been given one last chance to answer the evidence directly. Charles looked at him and said too many chances had become warnings without consequences. The prince heard firmness, but also fatigue. Meghan crossed the room after reading the notice in California. She told Harry the palace wanted them erased, not corrected. He answered that the loss was personal in a way she could never fully understand. The words landed hard. Her public identity had become tied to the Duchess of Sussex title, while his entire life had been shaped by birth, military service, grief, and his place as the younger son of a future king. Losing those distinctions threatened their influence, contracts, and the last emotional thread connecting them to royal history. Camilla urged Charles in a private conversation not to confuse punishment with abandonment. She feared the king was removing every bridge his son might one day need to cross. Catherine gave William a similar warning, telling him that defending the monarchy did not require celebrating another person's humiliation. Her words stopped the palace from presenting the decision as triumph. Harry lifted a framed photograph of himself in ceremonial military uniform and placed it face down. Meghan watched him, but she did not interfere. The gesture said what neither could admit. Royal history had become something he could remember, but no longer publicly claim. Yet beneath their grief, one earlier night demanded attention. The private London presentation, where the evidence first entered palace hands. To understand why Charles finally acted, the story must return to the night when a single encrypted drive changed the future of the House of Windsor. The crisis did not begin with a public speech, a television interview, or another explosive memoir. It began at a private charitable dinner in London, where a former media consultant arrived carrying something no one expected to see. Inside his coat was an encrypted drive, containing plans, messages, and recorded discussions tied to the Sussex brand. By midnight, the material had reached a palace security advisor. By morning, Charles knew the conflict had entered dangerous new territory. Harry and Meghan had spent years moving from official royal duty. Their departure had led to interviews, commercial projects, family accusations, and disputes over security, access, status, and the public use of their royal connection. Charles had tolerated a blurred compromise because he hoped dignity could survive distance. The arrangement allowed the couple to keep their titles without representing the crown, meaning they retained royal identity while holding no formal role. That mattered because the monarch was trying to protect family ties and institutional boundaries at once. Julian Mercer changed everything at a closed fundraising dinner at Lancaster House. The former consultant approached the king's deputy communications secretary and surrendered an encrypted drive. He explained in a documented statement that he could no longer support a strategy designed to turn future royal disputes into promotional events. Lancaster House, a government residence used for diplomatic gatherings, became the place where a family conflict became a security matter. Charles listened to the first recording the next morning. The conversation described how a title dispute might feed a documentary launch, speaking tour, and global media campaign. He removed his glasses and asked whether the audio had been authenticated. The deputy secretary confirmed that specialists had matched the voices, dates, and files. The king said nothing for seconds. Harry reacted with fury when told how the archive had reached the palace. He believed private brainstorming had been stripped of context. Meghan agreed, insisting Mercer had no right to retain confidential material. Yet investigators opened a second file, describing how their children, royal associations, and even a future reconciliation could support a long-term entertainment strategy. The danger became impossible to dismiss. Charles sent his son one written question: would he permanently stop using royal status in commercial negotiations? Harry's reply avoided an unconditional promise. That hesitation decided everything. The monarch closed the laptop before the final clip ended and ordered the archive placed under royal security review, a protected examination used when evidence may affect the crown. Harry demanded a direct confrontation. Charles agreed. No cameras, no advisors, no prepared escape. The evidence had brought them to the edge, but it was the confrontation between father and son that pushed the monarchy beyond retreat. There were no photographers waiting outside, no microphones hidden beneath polished tables, and no aides positioned to soften the language. Charles and Harry entered the room as king and prince, but within minutes, they were speaking only as father and son. The evidence lay between them in a sealed folder. Harry called it manipulation. Charles called it proof. Then the younger man said something that transformed a tense meeting into the final confrontation of their royal relationship. Harry had flown to Britain after receiving a confidential summary of the archive. Meghan joined the opening minutes through a secure audio connection, a protected call designed to prevent outsiders from listening or recording. Charles allowed her to speak, but he made one condition clear. The final conversation would belong to father and son alone. The king then placed a binding undertaking on the table, a written promise carrying legal force, and told his younger child that signing it was the only alternative to losing every remaining title. Meghan challenged the evidence first. She said the files were preliminary ideas, never approved plans, and demanded to know whether stolen material was being used to strip rights from her children as well as herself. Charles answered that Archie and Lilibet would not be punished for adult decisions, but royal access, private letters, and reconciliation could never again become bargaining tools. She left the call furious, warning Harry not to surrender his voice. Harry stared at the undertaking and accused the palace of treating him like a criminal. He said the monarchy had ignored his pain until that pain became public, then tried to control him once he survived outside its walls. Charles replied that suffering could explain choices, but it could not excuse turning private family moments into public currency. His voice stayed low until Harry said Diana would have understood him. Charles rose immediately. The monarch's face changed, and the room seemed to tighten around them. He told his son not to use his mother as a shield for decisions she could never answer for. Harry's anger broke through. He said keeping a title was not worth surrendering ownership of his own story. Harry read the final condition once more, then pushed the document back unsigned. Charles picked it up and folded it once. The younger man moved his chair away, walked toward the door, and waited for one final word. The king did not call him back. He only said refusal would have consequences by morning. Outside, advisors were already waiting to turn that warning into irreversible action. Harry had rejected the final condition, and behind the palace doors, the machinery of the crown began moving with terrifying speed. The king had made his choice, but royal anger alone could not complete it. Titles are woven into law, custom, parliamentary authority, and centuries of precedent. Every word had to survive scrutiny, every consequence had to be anticipated. Yet inside the council chamber, the debate was not cold or procedural. William sat with his hands locked together. Anne challenged the proposed language, and Charles faced the possibility that his own family might refuse to support him. Charles knew the decision needed more than a father's command. Some royal styles and honors could be withdrawn directly by the sovereign, the monarch who holds the crown's formal authority. Major hereditary titles, however, could require legal and parliamentary cooperation, because they pass through established law rather than personal favor. The palace therefore prepared 3 linked measures: a royal directive, a ceremonial removal order, and a legislative request intended to close every remaining path back to official status. Anne read the first draft without speaking. She placed it flat on the table and warned Charles that history must see discipline, not revenge. William agreed that royal identity could not remain a commercial tool, yet he feared the wording would destroy any chance of rebuilding his relationship with Harry. The prince asked for one clause protecting private family contact after public status disappeared. The king accepted the principle, but he refused to preserve public legitimacy merely to protect private hope. The Lord Chancellor and Palace Legal Secretary examined every line, ensuring the punishment remained limited to Harry and Meghan without creating uncertainty for other royals. A legal advisor then exposed the hidden danger. Removing Harry's princely status could alter archival references, ceremonial precedents, and language connected to Archie and Lilibet. Ceremonial precedence means the formal order in which royal figures are ranked at official events. Charles immediately rejected collective punishment. His grandchildren, he said, would not be blamed for choices made by adults, and their place in the family's private genealogy would remain untouched. William took a pen and crossed out the phrase, "permanent exclusion from the royal family." He replaced it with, "permanent exclusion from official royal representation." Charles studied the amendment, then nodded. Anne watched both men closely, understanding what the change preserved. Blood would remain, but duty would end. The council approved the final language. Sealed notices moved toward California, government offices, military bodies, and royal archives at once. Harry and Meghan were about to discover that the decision was not symbolic. It was already changing the world around them. The legal path was cleared, the notices were released, and within minutes, the Sussex world began losing the royal protections it had assumed would never disappear. The announcement did not remain a line on palace stationery. It moved instantly through websites, contracts, security files, charities, military records, and international newsrooms. Pages were rewritten, invitations were withdrawn, lawyers began calling. In California, Meghan watched her title vanish from an official royal website, while Harry received confirmation that the final ceremonial military distinctions attached to his name had been cancelled. For the first time, the separation from the crown felt absolute. Meghan refreshed the palace webpage and stared at the empty space where her title had appeared. Royal styling, the formal wording used to identify a member of the monarchy, had vanished from both profiles, while their biographies were moved into a historical family archive. That change mattered because it separated memory from authority. They remained part of royal history, but no longer held a recognized place in the crown's present life. She closed the laptop, opened it again seconds later, and told Harry that years of public work were being reduced to an administrative deletion. Harry read the military notice aloud. It confirmed that no honorary military style connected to royal service could be used beside his name. The loss cut deeper than publicity because those distinctions were tied to service, identity, and the years when duty gave him purpose. He walked outside alone while his phone kept ringing. Meghan watched him leave, then turned back toward the legal team gathering around the table. Pressure arrived from every direction. Ceremonial organizations received orders to stop using the old forms of address, and upcoming publications were told to print only their private names. Distributors asked whether promotional material using the Sussex name needed revision, while sponsors demanded clarity about future branding. Their attorneys identified a narrow challenge to the palace's use of privately obtained recordings. Meghan wanted the evidence contested publicly before silence hardened into guilt. Harry refused an immediate lawsuit. He warned that suing the crown within hours would prove the accusation that every family wound became content, leverage, or spectacle. A courier arrived before the argument ended. Harry signed for replacement identification documents prepared without royal styling and left the envelope unopened beside the door. Meghan picked it up later, turned it over in her hands, and understood the brutal truth. Their new reality had already been legally printed. Then Harry's phone finally lit up with William's name. He hesitated before answering, because this was not the heir calling a former royal. It was a brother reaching across years of anger, grief, and silence. The world expected lawyers and counterattacks, but the next turning point came through a quiet phone call between two brothers who had almost forgotten how to speak without witnesses. William did not call from an official office. Harry did not place the conversation on speaker. There were no secretaries taking notes, no communications teams drafting summaries, and no wives positioned to intervene. For 23 minutes, the brothers spoke alone. The conversation did not restore what had been broken, and it did not reverse the king's decision. But for the first time in years, Nang Germain was speaking to an audience beyond the other. Catherine had urged William to make the call, before public anger hardened into another cycle of accusation. She reminded him that a royal decision could be permanent, without forcing family silence to become permanent too. The prince understood why that mattered. Once grief turned into performance, every private wound would become another weapon, and the brothers might lose the final chance to speak as family, rather than opposing symbols. William set the boundary immediately. He was not calling to challenge Charles, restore the titles, or negotiate on behalf of the crown. Harry agreed that the conversation would not be recorded, repeated in an interview, or used in any future project. That promise mattered, because privacy had become the one thing neither brother trusted the other to protect. Harry finally admitted what the formal statements had hidden. Losing the titles felt like losing his last connection to Diana, his childhood, and the life he had once believed would always belong to him. Those symbols existed before contracts, documentaries, or public battles. William listened, then answered with painful honesty. He said the same symbols carried obligations his brother had repeatedly refused. Leaving royal duty was one decision. Continuing to draw authority from the institution while attacking it created a contradiction no family bond could indefinitely excuse. Harry asked whether William had listened to every recording. The future king said he had heard enough to understand why Charles acted, though he believed some material might lack full context. Then he offered one narrow bridge. Private contact with their father could continue. The children could know one another, but no reconciliation could become content, promotion, or leverage. Harry looked at the unsigned undertaking still lying on the table. Without telling William, he lifted it and placed it inside a drawer instead of tearing it apart. He was not accepting the palace's version of events, but he finally understood the boundary being drawn. The call ended without forgiveness, yet it also ended without hostility. Hours later, the first newspaper editions appeared, and the family's private pain became a worldwide verdict. The brothers had found a narrow path through the wreckage, but outside their private conversation, the world was already choosing sides. By sunrise, the decision belonged to everyone. Broadcasters interrupted regular programming. Newspapers rebuilt their front pages. Crowds gathered outside royal gates, while commentators argued over duty, cruelty, privilege, and consequence. Yet one image captured the moment more powerfully than any debate. A palace employee carrying two removed ceremonial nameplates across the courtyard beneath a gray morning sky. The photograph spread across the world, turning an internal royal punishment into a symbol of irreversible exile. Britain woke to a royal earthquake. Broadcasters described the order as the harshest disciplinary act of Charles's reign, while American networks focused on the damage to Harry and Meghan's public identity, contracts, and global influence. Across the Commonwealth, commentators argued over royal accountability, the principle that privilege must be matched by duty, and whether the decision restored standards or exposed a family collapsing in public. The palace released one written explanation and ordered staff not to brief against the couple personally. The London Herald captured the fury in a single front page. Charles's signature appeared beside 4 words: no title, no role, no return. Beneath it, the removed nameplates were shown, leaving the Royal Planning Office. At Buckingham Palace, several hundred people gathered near the gates. Some praised the king. Others left handwritten appeals for reconciliation. Then one woman began singing a hymn linked to Diana, and the crowd fell silent. Charles watched the broadcast without sound. When the camera turned toward Diana's supporters, the king looked away and asked for the screen to be switched off. Camilla obeyed, but she understood what the cheering outside could not reveal. The victory being claimed in his name felt like grief. The monarch had protected the institution, yet every headline reminded him that the person being punished was still his son. Meghan drafted a forceful response accusing the palace of weaponizing private material. Harry read it slowly, then asked her to remove the paragraph attacking Charles personally. She resisted, fearing silence would make the palace version permanent. He reminded her of William's private appeal and insisted that restraint was the only way to prevent another family wound from becoming a global performance. Their final statement rejected the fairness of the decision, but confirmed compliance with the new forms of address. That choice prevented an immediate constitutional battle and revealed that Harry had finally accepted one boundary, even without accepting the verdict itself. Now Charles faced the question no council could completely answer: had saving the crown cost him his younger son forever? The world had delivered its judgment, but the final verdict would be written in the silence between a father and the son whose title he had taken away. When the noise finally faded, there was no celebration inside the palace, and no dramatic surrender in California. The titles remained removed. The evidence remained sealed. The directive remained legally intact. Charles had protected the boundary between royalty and private ambition, but he had also accepted a wound that could never be completely repaired. Harry and Meghan were free of the institution they had rejected, yet they had lost the authority of the identity they continued to carry. The decision was finished. Charles allowed the removal order to take full effect. Harry and Meghan remained connected to the family through birth and marriage, but neither held an active, honorary, ceremonial, or representational title linked to the crown. A representational title is a status allowing someone to appear in the monarchy's name. Their names would remain in historical records, yet history was now the only royal space left open to them. The king then drew a boundary. Anyone could leave royal duty and build an independent life, but royal authority could not remain an endless commercial resource. That mattered because the monarchy depended on duty giving meaning to privilege, and because private family membership could no longer be confused with public power. Charles sent Harry a handwritten letter instead of another formal notice. He did not apologize for the directive. He wrote that removing a title did not remove a father's love, and he offered private contact without reopening the question of status. Harry read the letter alone, placed it beside the unopened identification envelope, and sent a reply. He accepted that the decision would not be reversed, but said he would speak when the anger settled. Meghan responded with resolve. She instructed her team to remove the ducal title from projects and rebuild their public identity around personal names. William told Catherine that the crown had gained clarity while the family had lost another piece of itself. She supported his promise to protect private contact with Harry without challenging the outcome. Charles returned to the desk where he had signed the order. He opened a family photograph showing both sons as children, studied it, and placed it inside the drawer reserved for private correspondence rather than official papers. The meaning was final. The crown had survived by ending ambiguity. Harry and Meghan had gained independence, but lost royal legitimacy. The family remained wounded, not erased. The king had removed the titles, the couple had accepted their new reality, and the monarchy moved forward, protected by a decision that saved its boundaries, while permanently changing the family behind the crown. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.